This should be good.
Mm.
All right, three fellas talking football. Dave Lochran, Ben Rasa, and Andrew Barron. We've got a really great show ahead of us today, specifically because we have a wild showdown slate that we're definitely going to talk about. It's amazing that content is actually being created for the showdown now, and then a 12-game Sunday slate for the first time with no New Orleans Saints. So that's a kind of big deal. But first let's get into a little scenario question here before we started the show. We were discussing a little question scenario here, and the question, Ben, was how many dogs could you bring home each day, one each day, before your significant other leaves you? Correct?
That's right.
And our producer, and obviously one of the front men here at awesemo.com, Josh Engelman, said the answer is 0, meaning
unlimited.
It would be unlimited. That
the limit does not exist.
There are no amount of times you could bring home a dog each day that would make your wife leave you, no matter how many consecutive days.
Your boy's going to be rich.
I find that to be nonsense.
Okay, well, it's obviously a nonsense answer in that it's not infinite, but the number is shockingly higher than probably anybody else's.
So you're saying
this raccoon story?
Yeah, we're gonna need to hear that.
So
day 19, it's not a problem.
I don't think it would be. I honestly don't think it would be.
Okay.
It depends on the dogs too. I mean, she's got to like the breed. Is going to be one part of it. That's neither here nor there. So growing up, she lived with her mom for a bit, and at one point in time, her mother was keeping a pet raccoon in the house. This is not like there's a raccoon that lives in this tree. We put nuts at the bottom of it, and he eats them from time to time. It lived in a cage.
Right, this was
in the kitchen.
Domesticated raccoon.
Domesticated is probably not the right word for it, but it did live in the house. There was no domestication whatsoever.
But they didn't add another one every day.
No, but what I'm saying is she has the blood of people that want to try to save animals in her.
So do I.
Comes from her mother. Also comes from her father. Her stepmom was a huge animal lover. It's just ingrained in her at this point. I would get to 10 dogs easy before she even batted an eye.
So you don't think every day there's just another dog that she doesn't question what the hell's going on? You don't think she's like, all right, I love dogs, but now we have 7 dogs, which is nice, but where are they going to sleep and eat? And
there's no room in the kitchen because there's 14 bowls out.
I'm so successful running a fake Alex Baker Twitter account and selling lineups that I could just afford the food for all of these dogs.
Now that's
there it is.
DM for details.
Yeah, $150 a day.
She's all about dogs. She loves saving them too, but there comes a point where the quality of life just spirals downwards, and then you have probably a $2 million per year food chart. It's not happening. Let's talk some football.
What are they eating at the steakhouses Ben goes to every night?
No, okay. If you had 100 dogs in the house, I have 1 dog now.
100?
They're not cheap. I
spend $80 on food a month probably for mine. Yeah, that's.
But if you win the showdown slate tonight, that could pay for all the dogs for a couple of years.
Look at that segue. Let's talk about.
Hold on, pause 1 second, because wasn't there supposed to be some I get 10 grand for every dog as well?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The actual scenario is you're getting
the actual scenario.
You can't tell your significant other. You would have to predetermine how many days, and if you do it, you win the money, and if not, there's some backlash. I don't know exactly. We haven't ironed out those details.
We haven't ironed. All right, let it's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. If you get kicked out of the house, then all the money goes to shit. So
that's right.
All right, let's
exactly.
try and sustain
everybody was
viewers
staying in a house on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You guys have fun. Right. I'm out of here.
Enough of you, Josh. All right.
Back to your bourbon.
So, Andrew, we have a showdown slate between the Colts and Andrew Luck, who undoubtedly looked like 2015 Andrew Luck last time. He threw 62 times, 464 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And that was with T.Y. Hilton playing only 48% of the snaps, right? So you're looking at guys like Chester Rogers and Zach Peskel and Naeem Hines and Eric Ebron. They are beat up offensively, but Andrew Luck did make the most of his weapons, if you'd like to call them weapons. They lost in overtime because Frank Reich made one of the dumbest decisions I've seen a head coach make.
Really?
Wow.
Absolutely. Just a wildly stupid. Look, I am 100% for going for it. Like, in terms of fourth downs, I've always been a numbers guy in that you're better going. Like, I'd go for 4th and 1 at my own 40, at the 50, whatever. But this is different because it's sudden death. And you're essentially guaranteeing that if what were they at their own 43 or something? Essentially guarantee. What's that?
Yeah, around there. Yep.
Around that. That if you don't convert that with a team of scrubs, granted he was playing well, the game is over. I don't understand, especially in a weak division, why you would take that risk in overtime, knowing that you essentially have lost if you don't convert there. I did not. I thought that was a really, really questionable call. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought they should have. To me, with a team like that, where you're probably, I can't see many ways where a tie is going to help you. Their only chance is
better than a loss.
See, that's the thing. I don't know if it is, to be honest. Like, I think their only chance is to run super pure, and you have to take every victory that you could possibly get. I would rather guarantee that I win or lose. Because if you punt, you obviously have a 0% chance to win. It's almost 99% that you're going to tie.
Bella, are you happy about that Browns tie when you have over 6.5 wins in our little side bet? That didn't help you much, did it?
It's not about that. It's just about, like, you're going for it, and if you don't convert it, it's not that if Houston needed to score a touchdown, it'd be different, but they didn't. They needed a field goal. So to me, I just thought it was, as Julian McQueen says in chat, colossally stupid. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about this slate a little bit. Go to you, Andrew. What are you making of this? Because Pascal's super cheap, and then you have a few other guys that are really cheap, but you have an expensive Luck, an expensive Gronk, an expensive Brady, an expensive White. I mean, you're going to want to pay for players here. You're expecting to see a lot of points. The showdown is generally a lottery ticket, but this seems like a super, super Powerball lotto ticket tonight.
Yeah, man. I haven't put a whole ton of effort into this one, to be honest with you, because I find it really difficult. I have some guy named Jordan Wilkins in my captain spot in a couple of things, which I was like, what is going on here? But he's got 15 carries over the last couple of weeks, max out again, and you're just hoping he falls into the end zone once or twice. It's like Aldrick Robinson last week was on winning teams, and that guy played 8 snaps. It's just like you're going to have to get lucky, and especially in a game like last week or tonight where the good plays are super expensive, you need to find a way to free up some money, and that's the easiest way to free up money is playing scrubs in your captain spot that have some upside. Because with a defense, it's a little hard. It's a little harder for them to get there. You're hoping for kind of a crappy game for that to work. But, when you have a guy like Robinson or, Jay Wilkins, you're hoping you get 15 points out of him, and you can afford to pay for Brady and Gronk, who score a couple touchdowns, with Luck and Ebron, who connect for a couple. And I don't know. That's what I'm doing. I'm not saying it's going to work, but who knows? It's tough.
You're not playing this showdown slate to cash, because there's no lineup, Ben, that you can make, and you're like, this seems like a good lineup to cash. You know what I mean? It's kind of like what Andrew said. I'm plugging Pascal into my captain spot, hoping that he gets targeted and plays more than 50% of snaps because Hilton's out for the entirety of this game. I'm going to get some Chris Hogan in there just because, like Andrew said, Aldrick Robinson is the one getting it done last week. Was in, I think, 6 guys tied for first. He's in all of those lineups, the same line. It's very rare that you play a conservative lineup, like an orthodox lineup, and it works, especially on this slate. It seems
it's not to go in on Showdown, but I found it hilarious. Everyone thought this was a terrible idea by DraftKings, and they're just raking money in because oh my God, what a stupid idea. They're going to make halftime tournaments and they'll be raking it in with that.
Yeah. I can't wait.
Yeah, seriously. It's funny because, and I'm not suggesting people don't research and talk about it. It's good to discuss the slate, but it is, to me, a wildly different mindset to make a Showdown lineup and build a DFS lineup for the classic traditional way. This is just so atypical. The plays are so far secondary to just making somewhat of a narrative and somewhat of a, can you get a guy that's not that he's going to be unique, that's impossible, but can you get someone who's not even, a little against the grain and hope that they go off because it's one game. Like you said, Chris Hogan's in my captain spot on a lot of lineups. He barely was involved last week. There's a real chance that he's even less involved this week. But that's not what I'm really going for. I'm going for the random, he has 3 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and somehow, a small percentage of people have him in that captain spot. And that's, in a Showdown slate like this, that's really all you're looking for, is something unique.
Exactly. It's that simple. I have a bunch of Hogan. Actually, I say a bunch. I'm not playing a lot.
No, neither.
Yeah, I started making lineups, planning on throwing like 10 or 20 in there. I'm like, I'm just clicking buttons. But I have some Hogan in there because, everyone's going to have a very tough time justifying Chris Hogan in the captain spot or in the lineup at all. And really, you're talking about someone that still played like 90% of snaps last week. Granted, Gordon could play more this week. Edelman's back. I mean, it's not a shining opportunity for Hogan to bounce back. It's just, you don't win these unless you make decisions that on the surface should be considered stupid. You know what? Does that make sense? Like, playing Hogan in the captain spot, if you're not thinking outside of the box, is just stupid with how he's performed and with the personnel that they have. Playing Aldrick Robinson last week also would have been pretty dumb.
Yeah. And it's kind of like a scale in the sense, I don't know, maybe you could say cash games are all the way to the left where you just want the optimal play. You don't worry about anything else. Then you have a normal, say a 10-game slate where you want optimal plays, but you factor in ownership. And then there's this where, to me, optimal plays are so far behind, just being different. That's really all it's about.
We say that on like 4-game baseball slates all the time. It's like, if your lineup looks awesome on a 4-game slate, you're probably not winning a tournament. You got to do something weird. You got to do something uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
That Showdown. It's actually, to be honest with you, I'm kind of happy that this is not that this first Patriots game with Edelman back is not a real slate, because and whatever, sometimes that can be nice for tournaments, but I have no idea how this is going to work because Hogan was doing a lot of the Edelman stuff. Like, he was playing out of the slot more than he
catching
normally
the ball.
does. Right. But he was playing out of the slot a lot. He's better on the outside. He was pretty productive on the outside last year, but him moving back to the outside, it's like they've already got Dorsett there and now they've got Gordon there. So it's like, how much is he going to play? I really don't know. So it's going to be a fascinating game to watch to have a better idea of how to attack the Patriots for real when it comes down to it, when they get back on the slate next week.
Thursday, which,
let us
short
know
week
in chat let us know in chat who you think should be, who you think will be in the winning lineup at the captain spot today. Ben, give me a prediction. That's what it comes down to, baby. Who you got in that captain spot?
I mean, if I did mention Hogan, but I'll say Sony Michel.
Sony Michel, interesting. I don't have much Sony, but he looked really solid last week, and I'm pretty excited about that.
I do think that there's a scenario here where they just blow the doors off them to the point, and they Gronk, he's playing, but they don't want to get him even more injured, and they just say, what, we're going vanilla. Let's just run it all the time.
You could be right. Look at some of these answers. I love it, man. You got James Devlin from Ace Boogie. Well, I mean, like, if that happened, you'd be like, all right, Showdown slate.
Yeah. A guy not on the team, like, anything possible.
Joseph says, Ebron. Michael Fitch says Brady, duh. You never know. And then Julian says we're going to check our phones at midnight and find out Pascal would have won someone a tournament in the captain spot. I have some Pascal in the captain spot because he's so cheap. Andrew, who's going to be in the winning lineup captain spot?
I don't know. Brian Grant.
Brian Grant. All right. Yeah, I don't think Ben knew who Devlin was even.
Yeah, that's a borderline creative player. He's
like been around for a while. He's a fullback. They don't even make those anymore.
He's a fullback. Demetrius says Andrew Luck. I could certainly see that. But just honestly,
if Andrew Luck goes nuts, like how are you getting him in the captain spot? Because if he goes nuts, unless it's all to one guy, it's pretty hard for you to be able to afford Luck in the captain spot.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's not easy at all. And yeah, it's all right. We got some interesting answers though, which is exactly what you should expect. People thinking outside of the box, at least. But a guy like Devlin, that's tough. But so is Aldrick Robinson. I mean, I'll be clear. I'm not going to have any James Devlin.
No,
but anything can happen.
We saw. I mean, this is the guy's name is, I think it's Cyrus Gray, I want to say. Who was the Patriot running back who had that
Jonas Gray.
Jonas Gray. Yeah, the 5 touchdown. And then they cut him a week later.
Yeah. This week smells like that because the Colts are as banged up as you could be. Short week going into Foxborough. Edelman, Gronk, everyone's finally back. It would be so typical Patriots for them not to use any of those guys, especially if they get out ahead and really go vanilla to someone I'm not saying Devlin. To me, it's Sony Michel that they run him into the ground, maybe.
Edelman's only been back with the team since Monday, too. It's Thursday.
Playing ping pong.
All right, enough James Devlin talk. Let's move to something of substance here. Let's go to the Sunday slate. If you guys have any questions for the showdown slate that we haven't talked about, you can hit us up in chat and we'll get to you in chat for sure. But I want to talk about Sunday. We've got a good amount of information, a few days to go before Sunday. So it's Thursday. We have a pretty good idea of who's practicing and who's legitimately questionable and who's out and who's going to play. But Ben, something you mentioned before we started this live stream is that this slate breaks down so much differently because one single team is not on the slate, and that is the New Orleans Saints.
Yep. It's crazy because normally when a team's off the slate, you could say, a couple options. But the way they're structured, the highest priced wide receiver and running back are obviously not available, Kamara and Michael Thomas. What that's going to do, because people have been using them at a massive rate, it's going to cause ownership funneled to, the Antonio Brown this week and whoever running back's interesting. Now Gurley is by himself. So that's just something we haven't had to deal with. It's always been those two, not only being a decision, but at the same time, if you avoided them, they were taking hordes of people away. Now, obviously, they're going to be both 0% owned. They're not on the slate. Where does all that ownership go?
Exactly. Now, we do have the Chiefs on the slate. We didn't have them on the slate last week, Andrew. But the Chiefs are playing Jacksonville. So this slate it truly does break down a lot differently than any slate through the first 4 weeks. It just on the surface, I'll let you know if it's my favorite around 7 p.m. on Sunday. But right now, I really am liking. I do like what I see here, and I like that you can be a little bit different without having to work. Because seriously, the first few weeks, it's like the main question is, do I risk not playing Kamara and die, or risk playing him and die because he doesn't have 40 at $10,000? And almost every week he did give you around 40, but him being off the slate and Kansas City facing Jacksonville definitely throws a wrench into the works.
Yeah, every week it's like, I mean, he's over $9,000. Like, he's going to have to score almost 40 to really kill me. I can avoid that.
Then he has 20 with 2 minutes left, and you're like, all right, this has turned out good. Wait a minute. From the top row, 46-point Kamara game.
How much was that touchdown worth last week?
Over 15. Like, it was massive.
Oh God. And that cost you a good chunk of change, man.
Yeah, he was and this is what, when you have the massive ownership with the high octane like that, it moves the entire slate. Because it's, when a guy's 5% owned, a couple teams jump you, but when half the tournament has him, that's moving everything. And that's going to be, I'm really fascinated to see what happens. Maybe it's more balanced as a whole and we don't have a 40% super expensive guy, or maybe Antonio Brown takes that role.
I think it's that game that's going to be the most popular because, Julio is another guy. Pittsburgh's defense looks awful. James Conner will be really popular because everyone knows the Atlanta, receiving to running backs thing.
Yep.
Juju's a great price. That guy's seeing insane volume. Last week was really disappointing, actually. He was on the Sunday night game. He was like my favorite play of the whole week. Got his 11 targets, including some long red zone ones. Caught like 4 of them because I don't know. Ben's a problem too. Like, I don't know if he's looking I don't know about washed, but he does not look good. The rest of those guys are awesome, and he just
when Ben doesn't perform at Heinz Field, you got to be worrying a little bit. But I will say there's one caveat there, is that generally speaking, the Pittsburgh is not cranking out 40-point games against Baltimore all that often. I think one thing we did see is that Pittsburgh's defense is definitely struggling. But, I read an interesting article. I mentioned this last week by Bucky Brooks on NFL.com. Whether you like him or not is unimportant here. But, Andrew, I found it interesting, and it was simply that without Le'Veon Bell, Connor's been serviceable. After week 1, he's definitely taken a turn downward, but so have a lot of players on this team. Without Le'Veon Bell, teams aren't focusing as much on the run, and they've done a very good job of taking the deep outside pass away from Antonio Brown. If you look at Antonio Brown this season alone, he has a long reception of 27 on the season, right? On the season. His 20-plus yard receptions are way down from last year in terms of pace. And the middle of the field, as a result, has been wide open, which is why we're seeing, you had mentioned this a couple weeks ago, Jesse James wide open in the middle of the field in week 2, I think it was, week 2 or 3. Vance McDonald wide open in the middle of the field on several long receptions. And particularly, look how many of Juju Smith-Schuster's passes are coming in the middle of the field. Teams are trying their best to take the big play away from Antonio Brown, and it's helping everybody else. But as a team, I think it's working to their detriment.
Yeah, Juju's getting a monster workload because teams are just throwing so much
right
at Brown. You can't blame them. Trufant's fine, but I don't think they can leave him on an island. And then they don't have it. Atlanta's out of safeties. Like, they lost both of their starters. So
but it's interesting.
Atlanta cannot cover the middle of the field.
No. At all.
The thing is, though, if the Steelers were punishing teams for doing that, I think it would open it up a little more. The problem is they don't look good. So I feel like every team now has incentive to just bracket Antonio Brown and live with the rest. And that makes it tricky from a DFS standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Ace Boogie asked, are there any games you think that will outscore the Pittsburgh-Atlanta game, in your guys' opinion? I'll give you 2 that I think could rival it. The first one is Green Bay and Detroit. I think we could see a lot of scoring here. I really wouldn't be surprised to see both teams put up numbers. Matthew Stafford generally comes out, puts up some solid games against this Green Bay team. Funny, too, over the last 2 years in 4 games, Marvin Jones has 480 yards and 5 touchdowns against Green Bay through 4 games. But neither here nor there. I think that's a game that could see a lot of scoring. And I also think the Chargers and Oakland should see a lot of scoring. This Chargers defense, Ben, has been way worse than advertised. Joey Bosa remains out. And the Oakland defense is complete and utter garbage in both facets, in the run and in the pass. I think that game could see a lot of scoring too. So those are the 2 games that I wouldn't be surprised to see at least rival the scoring in Pittsburgh, Atlanta. But it certainly feels like that one in Pittsburgh is going to be the highest scoring for sure.
Yeah, in my article, I write one every week, obviously. I do put game I'm most interested in, and I picked the Green Bay game. I think that has a sneaky shootout potential in the Dome, divisional game. I see that getting up and down. Oakland Chargers, another good one. I do have a little interest in the Chargers D still. Not that I don't think it could get up and down. We talk about how that's not exactly correlated. But yeah, there's some potential besides that Falcons-Steelers game, which for obvious reasons. I mean, the totals, I think it's north of 55. It's really up there.
58.
Yeah, that's for an NFL.
Wait,
that's up there.
It's moved to 58?
That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's
oh my God, you're right. With a 3-point spread. So you're looking at a 30.5 implied total for 30.5 for Pittsburgh and 27.5 for Atlanta. Have you noticed too, Andrew? Pittsburgh, in terms of Vegas, in terms of where the money's come, where the lines are set, Pittsburgh's getting, it seems, a lot more respect than they deserve through the first quarter of the season from a Vegas standpoint.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I see why their games are getting high totals and coming in higher. They have no defense, and the thing about the Pittsburgh, I think the thing.
Well,
I'm
talking about the Steelers still being 3-point favorites. I think it's actually surprising with how they've played.
Yeah, except Atlanta has absolutely no defense, and
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, they're terrible defensively.
And if it's just Roethlisberger, like everyone else on Pittsburgh's offense is good and playing well. It's just Roethlisberger. So if he can, they have a really good offensive line. They have good wideouts. James Conner's fine. Like if Roethlisberger plays well, then they should put up a ton of points. And they've been putting up like reasonable points. It's coming in weird ways. I don't know. I will say with Detroit and Green Bay, are you guys not a little? I mean, I hear what you're saying, but both of those teams are way more excited to run this year than they have been, it seems like, in years past, and neither of them can really stop the run. So I would worry about the pace a little in that game if both of them are moving the ball at will. Then it might be more of a, just lots of running. But
I see it a little differently, only because of this. Week 3 against the Patriots, Stafford they ran heavily, and he still threw 36 times, and that was a game that they had a pretty comfortable lead. Against Dallas, he threw 30 times. I thought the game planning in that game was really rough. But I mean, the guy's still averaging like what? He's attempted 165 passes through 4 games. That's what, 41. He's 41. Still even if they're running a lot, Stafford's still going to chuck it, man. And I think the great thing about this team is they have no tight end to siphon away any of that market share. So you're looking at guys in Tate and Golladay and Jones that even if you do have a balanced attack, those guys are still going to get a lot of work.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it makes sense. You're right. I mean, Stafford's a good play. He's only 5,700 too, which is a nice price. So yeah. I'm there with you. I just that ceiling worries me a little bit, but
I got you.
No, I think it's fair. I will say too, though, like if you're getting gash via the run, you may throw less, but your yards per attempt, it should open it up. Like you could be hitting monster play action, big plays, and if they give the ball to Kerryon Johnson, that could very well happen. I really like that guy. They just don't seem to want to hand over the keys to him.
Yeah, 9 carries or so last week. Like, is LeGarrette Blount that much? It's really silly. On the other side, though, Ben. Oh, and by the way, remember my obscure play of the week, Aaron Jones last week.
And you were talking about being early. I heard his name a lot this week. A lot of chatter there, and I see it. But you were right on that awesome call last week.
Appreciate it, brother. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a monster game, but it is probably, 11 attempts, 65 yards, a touchdown. He had a 17-yard reception. And what was nice about that is that can we all agree that Aaron Jones is the most talented back in that backfield? Because I personally don't think it's close. I think Jamal Williams stinks.
Yeah, honestly, I might have him third, to be honest.
It's just I feel like Aaron Jones is only, and Aaron Rodgers said that he really wanted to see Jones get more involved in the offense. He played 38% of snaps last week, one more snap than Williams. I think that continues to rise here. I don't think he's a terrible play either. You're not going to get a lot of work in the passing game, but I think he will get some goal line looks. What are you guys' thoughts on Rodgers, though? Because he's still Aaron Rodgers, but is he still the Aaron Rodgers? Because factor in the injuries and some kind of very underwhelming performances through the first 4 weeks. I get he didn't need it last week, but he still threw 40 times. I don't know. It feels like if I'm going with a quarterback in this game, I prefer Stafford at a cheaper price, but maybe you guys can sway me.
I'm more on Stafford myself. I do think if Green Bay is killing them, they will run it. Rodgers is still a little banged up. He ran again last week, looked a little more mobile, but I mean the The other thing is he just doesn't really have the weapons that he's had in the past.
They're really banged up now. Like, I didn't even know Devontae Adams was also banged up in addition to Cobb and Allison.
Yeah, and Devontae Adams isn't even really good. Geronimo Allison ran a 4.740. He's like, they don't really have particularly good weapons. We're going to play the other creative player, Valdez Scantling, this week.
Yeah.
I've ended up playing a little of him last week. So our buddy Ponta was on him, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to sprinkle some of this before. And he played most of the snaps, but had one catch on 3 targets.
The other thing is,
at least it was a 38-yarder.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to get one.
Are we going to have
that 4.8 points really helped last week.
I'll tell you what, though, dude, Equanimous St. Brown. This is a guy who they've always said incredibly talented, but does he want to work for it?
He was sick in college.
Equanimous St. Brown. That has to be a UFC fighter.
Equanimous.
That is not an NFL player name. That's a UFC fighter.
It's real. I actually drafted him in some dynasty leagues, man. He has the talent, like he does, and he received the bulk of the reps on the first team offense during today's practice, according to RotoWire. So you're gonna see Allison isn't practicing, and with these concussions, they linger, and we know how that works. Randall Cobb, is Randall Cobb confirmed out?
I don't think he's confirmed out, but last I heard from him, he wasn't even close to playing last week, they said.
Right. Okay. And Adams was a non-participant today too. So it's very possible to either one of you guys that wants to answer this, that Valdez Scantling, Equanimous St. Brown, and Jamon Moore are the 1, 2, and 3 receivers this week.
I don't even know who that last guy is.
They have a lot of talented rookies. It's just you never know who's going to do it. But that's crazy. Those could be the 3 starting wide receivers this week in week 5.
Which there's 2 ways to look at that. There's there's all these guys that are really cheap. You can pair them with the best quarterback in football. Or you can say, those weapons stink. Let's not play Aaron Rodgers. Let's just avoid this.
So the other thing with Rodgers, and this is an overarching point, if we were back to where, if he could get, say, 18 points, it wouldn't kill you. The problem now is you need 4 or 5x from your quarterback. There's too many other guys, and I don't think he has that right now just altogether. It's not a knock on him. It's just someone like Stafford, he could get you 30, 35.
Because Stafford might throw the 2 picks to keep the other team in the game. You almost want that because that's how you're going to throw for you're going to throw for 450 with 4 touchdowns and 2 picks. That's a lot easier than an Aaron Rodgers perfect game is 320 with 3 touchdowns and no picks. And that's probably not even that, that's not really that good in this. I mean, it's fine, but that's not anything tournament winning in this day and age.
So, I mean, the question is though, does Aaron Jones, and not just Aaron Jones, but how much work does Ty Montgomery get in a spot like this? Because it does feel like a spot where Montgomery could be used pretty heavily in the passing game.
Yeah. I mean, I like Ty Montgomery, actually. I think when we were talking about who maybe the most talented of those running backs are, I sort of like Montgomery just because he is more of a receiver. Right. And I tend to gravitate towards those dudes. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting sneaky play, but I'm less into the Green Bay plays on the whole, I think, than you are.
No, I'm not that into him. I just think no matter who Rodgers' weapons are, I think divisional game, I think it still stays very close. So what I'm saying is I don't know where to go to the weapons, but I do feel like there will be someone's going to produce. That's all I'm saying. When Rodgers is at the helm, someone will produce. Same thing with Brady, right? With these good quarterbacks, someone's going to do it. It's just, I don't know who.
Yeah. I've had a lot of Jimmy Graham the last 2 weeks, and that's been ugly, but I think the explosion game is possible for him, but still waiting on it. And he's not going to get with him. The explosion game is 5 for 60 and 2 touchdowns. It's not, I don't think he's going to be a guy who catches 130 yards or anything.
That's possible. I want that cat, says St. Brown, is the play. I think he very much could be. It's clearly a toss-up. And Valdez Scantling has been the preferred guy with everyone healthy, getting the fourth wide receiver snaps. But yeah, he's going to get a lot of work this week. It really just comes down to who Rodgers looks to, and we know that he's pretty competent when it comes to spreading the ball around. If you guys have any other games you want us to talk about specifically, we'll definitely do that. But for now, Ben, how about this Chargers-Oakland game? You're talking about a game last week where goes into overtime. Derek Carr throws 58 times, obviously threw 2 interceptions, which isn't much of a surprise, but also threw 4 touchdowns. And, Amari Cooper had a game. Never can predict it, but he did. Jared Cook continues to put up monster numbers. I mean, he's had 2 30 fantasy point games this season. And then Marshawn Lynch has been very consistent, averaging 21 touches per game, or 21 looks per game. And then on the other side, of course, you have Phillip Rivers in a very, very favorable spot and an over-under that's currently sitting at 53, the second highest on the slate. What are you doing with this one?
Interesting game. Oakland's a team I don't really have a good feel for. Honestly, them playing the Rams first, and I got so disillusioned with that Jared Cook. That was such an outlier. It's caused me not to look at him as closely as I should have. I do think that the Chargers D is going to cause some problems, not in the sense that it can limit Carr. He'll just be inefficient, which you can still, we were just talking about this. You can put up monster games, but I'm more interested. Obviously, Melvin Gordon's going to be popular, and he is just, now that the abilities in the backfield, not just running, catching the ball, they love him in the red zone. Eckler, even though he's taking some work, it doesn't seem to affect the bottom line. The one thing that I've kind of found interesting, Keenan Allen feels like a lost guy these days. I never see his name brought up. He's not in that top tier with the Julios, the AJ Green. A big game's probably coming. Having said that, I don't know if it's, Tyrell and Mike Williams are taking enough. I just haven't seen much from him this year.
Yeah. The one game he left early, he was injured, and then I think another thing too, I'll ask you, Andrew, the game flow or game script has definitely gotten away from him in a couple games, like against Buffalo, and then a very difficult matchup against the Rams. Although he plays a lot in the slot, so it shouldn't have been that tough. But obviously, it's still a tough defense. But then in the matchup with KC, he had a big game. San Francisco, they played with the lead despite that game getting closer towards the end. They played with the lead for almost the entirety of that game. But Ben is right. Like, you haven't heard a ton of Keenan Allen, and I think a lot of that is because you've had so many other monster wide receiver performances this year. Keenan Allen hasn't done it yet, and maybe he just needs a huge game to get his name back on the radar.
Yeah, I had a lot of Keenan Allen last week. I thought that was a really good matchup for him. And again, against the Rams, that was a decent matchup just for him specifically because they just don't really have the linebackers or the slot guys really. I do think against Oakland, that's more of a team to attack vertically, so it is a bit more of the Williams dudes kind of game. Just because Oakland's pretty slow in the secondary, they don't generate a pass rush at all, so there's plenty of time to throw deep. So I think this could be a nice Tyrell Williams bounce back spot, have him get one of his 60-yard bombs. I mean, he's a huge and really fast guy. Those are big-time touchdown catchers. Melvin Gordon, obviously, no argument here. I don't really need to expound on what Ben was saying. That's totally fine. And I think Jared Cook is totally in play. I had him in cash last week. That really it was just a weird end of the slate where I went from up 20% to down 50%. And then like Jared Cook going crazy at the end, like made me get back in all my head-to-head. So like I don't know. It wasn't a great week, but it went from like
225.
I scored 225 in cash. It was like an 80th percentile lineup. It's like, wow. Okay.
Unbelievable.
It was bananas, but.
Oh my God. So the other side of this game, though, Oakland is not a good football team, but they still have some good fantasy weapons. We've seen it every week, even on bad weeks. There's at least one guy that's producing, right? Whether it's Jordy, whether it's Cook, whether it's Cooper, whether it's Lynch. Like, you're all talking about guys, Cooper, Nelson, Lynch, and Cook are all averaging over 15 fantasy points per game this season. Now, you might say, that has nothing to do with it. Well, what I mean by that is this team isn't good, but it's not like the Cardinals bad, where they lose games and have no fantasy value whatsoever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I will say that Jordy catch, the like crazy 75-yarder or whatever, that was not him or Carr. That was Minkah Fitzpatrick got lost. Jordy was clear by like 10 yards of anyone, and he got chased down from behind by a linebacker. Like, that's a touchdown for anybody else in the league. Like, he's totally lost. He used to be a good athlete, but he's totally lost it. So
I'm 100% not recommending to play Jordy. What I'm saying is that they are still going to move the ball. The good thing about Derek Carr, absolutely. No, I'm with you. But like Derek Carr, what you could easily see is another 300-yard game with 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, right? And they still lose. Yeah. So I don't know. I go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, it's just an inefficient team. It kind of reminds me of Deshaun Watson with the Texans, where it's not pretty, but for fantasy, it actually helps sometimes because it's just erratic. It's ugly. They're throwing it all over the place. They're trying to come back. Then they turn it over in the red zone, and the team scores quickly, so they get the ball back, and now he's throwing again. Cooper, I think you can make a case for sure. Obviously, Cook is a real play. The one guy, Marshawn Lynch, I'm just scared to, once again, I keep going back to this overarching theme of where you really need ceilings, and he just doesn't really catch the ball. It's hard to rely on him probably having to find the end zone at least probably twice to really get there.
Yeah. I think so too. Amari Cooper is the guy that in weeks with tough matchups, he goes off. No one's considering him. And then weeks where you're like, all right, you got to play Amari. He gets 2 targets and drops both of them. He's just such a difficult player to predict. But I think there's Ben. I just think there's legitimate game stack potential here. And maybe I'm on an island here. I just think that both of these defenses were playing poorly enough, and both offenses are capable enough to move the ball downfield and put points on the board. So I'm just curious how popular this game is going to be, because if it's got to be. It has the second highest total.
Yeah, there's going to be people on it. I just think, not that it's going to play out the exact same, but the Browns and the Raiders showed there were great targets, but I had a lot of the Raiders defense, and they gave up 45 or 42 points, and they still were pretty damn good because they scored, they were turning the ball over. Yeah. It seems like one of those games where you can attack from a lot of different areas because there's going to be, aggressive defenses, big plays. So I don't mind it. It's just going to be correlating it properly. I'll probably have different scenarios play out with this game. I do think it's going to be a key of the slate overall, though.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you?
I don't know. I struggle with that a little bit because the Raiders are a team I don't usually love in general for fantasy because Derek Carr doesn't really throw it super deep. And the thing with the Chargers, even when they were good, and really the only difference is Bosa. I think that's just that big of a deal for them because when you have 2 guys that you have to think about sending a double team towards with your offensive line, all of a sudden it's much more difficult to deal with. Melvin Ingram's good, but he can't do it by himself. Having another pass rusher is a huge deal. If you have 2 guys that can beat single coverage, then teams have to think about you. So they're getting beat by big plays, and they would get beat by big plays before, is I guess what I was saying. I think Casey Hayward is a little bit overrated. I kind of been on that, and they'll leave him alone, and you can beat him on a big play. But Derek Carr doesn't like to air it out until he does. That's the thing. Like you were saying about Cooper, it's I have no idea when that's ever going to happen. But every once in a while, he not only has a big game, but he's getting it on huge downfield throws too. Sometimes Carr will launch it to him, and there's just seems to be no way to figure that out.
It's impossible to predict.
With the Chargers, I'm not that this is overly important, but they're 2-2. It hasn't been great. They've lost to the Chiefs and the Rams, who are both undefeated. So, it remains to be seen. Now, they beat up on 2 garbage teams. They're probably somewhere in the middle, but they haven't done anything, honestly, besides they probably should be 2-2 when you really look at it.
Right. Look, I don't think this is it's funny too. They were 6.5 point favorites at home against Kansas City.
Yep, and they got whooped.
But that Chiefs team is surprising. Look, it's not just that though. It's that even in their wins, they've given up points. 20 points to Buffalo is 40 to any other team. 29 to CJ Beathard and the Niners, 29 points at home. Like here's the point totals they've allowed this year: 29 and then 35, 20, and 38. Sure, they've played two elite offenses, but I'd still see a lot of points being scored in this game. We don't have a ton of time. I want a couple of other spots to hit on here. Now, a lot of injuries, so you got to pay close attention to that going forward. But Andrew, we've talked about now the 3 games that have the highest totals, or at least the 2 games with the highest totals: Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and then Oakland and the Chargers. It looks like the Detroit Pack and Green Bay game has a 51-point total. So that's up there as well. That's actually the 3rd highest. So, okay. Are there any spots that you're looking at that may be off the radar to, the normal player? Like maybe this Kansas City Jacksonville game interests you, or anything else anywhere that we haven't talked about that jumps off the page at you as good low-owned guys with a lot of upside?
Yeah, I mean, Leonard Fournette's probably out, right? So
yeah, he's out.
He's
already out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Yeldon is only 5,600. If he gets most of the workload, which he should, they've still got who's the other guy? Corey Grant. But he'll, if he gets 70% of the workload or something like that, I think he's a really solid value play. You get a little worried if the Chiefs go out there and just start pounding on him. But again, we saw Mahomes. That was the first real challenge he had to face last week, and he was pretty good, but he finally made a couple mistakes. He had a fumble. He threw a pass that could have been picked, which literally he hadn't done all year. He got it done, but it was a little ugly. Like you saw what the Broncos got pressure on him, and Jacksonville's probably going to be able to do that too. I wish this was in Jacksonville because I would be so amped to play the Jaguars defense. But I think that will be a tough challenge for him, and I think that Yeldon could really produce in that spot. And again, Kansas City is also super live to just put up some crazy points. Tyreek Hill could certainly get loose a couple of times. Mahomes has made some unbelievable throws. So if it starts looking like no one is going to play them at all because they respect Jacksonville so much, I mean, it's still a really explosive offense at home in the sort of modern NFL where you can't touch anybody as a defense. So there is potential for Kansas City to go nuts. I think I will probably be playing. I will try to get over on the field on both the Kansas City offensive pieces and the Jaguars defense in this situation.
Yeah, I think you're right. But let me ask Ben, in terms of Jaguars offensive players, what are you doing here? Because it's only fair to point out that Blake Bortles has not been a liability as far as this offense goes, right? Like he's had one game against Tennessee was dreadful. And then against the Giants, also not a good game, but he's also had 2 really solid games with 376 passing yards, 388. So I don't see myself rostering Bortles when there are so many other quarterbacks priced near him that are in great spots. But TJ Yeldon, who is reasonably priced, and the pass catchers here, there are some of the guys that can make an impact. It's just so difficult to know which one is going to be each week, whether it's Keelan Cole or Westbrook or Moncrief. None of them are exceptional, but one of them seems to have the numbers each week. I'm wondering, who do you think it'll be in week 5?
So, yeah, it's funny when they seem to let Bortles go a little and give him when Fournette is out, that's kind of sometimes what happens. He responds. Sometimes he does throw up an awful one, but he's proved he's capable. I'm trying to take a stab this week, and we'll see if it's wrong. I think that D.D. Westbrook is going to assert himself as the clear number 1 there.
Okay.
He had a big week last week. I think that we're going to start where he just kind of takes a step forward. He's sub 5K, good matchup. I really like him this week. I think that's a guy that I have that's a game I'm pretty interested in. I know I'm the last person in the world to be on the Mahomes. I have some interest in Mahomes this week, finally, after pretty much being underweight for a while now. But yeah, D.D. Westbrook, I think, talented guy. It's murky right now. It's crowded, but I think him and Bortles start to really solidify themselves as the number 1 connection.
All right, and Julian's asked this a couple times, Andrew. How about San Francisco, Arizona? He said, I could see both Breida and David Johnson running wild. Any thoughts on this game? Because obviously it's not going to be at the forefront of most people's research, but that doesn't mean it's bad either.
Nope, not giving up on David Johnson. Not going to do it. Can't do it.
Yeah, you're in way too deep now.
Same with Russell Wilson's the other one against the Rams, but he's 5,100 at home, and he's well equipped to deal with that Rams pass rush more than other people are. Like, I think Russell Wilson's like borderline cash play.
Wow.
Just because there's a lot of good skill position players that you want to pay up for. I haven't done a ton of building, but when I started to, unless we get a $3,800 wide receiver that we all want to play, I think you're going to need to spend down a quarterback with that flat pricing.
Stafford for me, only like 500 more. But yeah, I see that logic for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, Stafford, the QB pricing is really flat. I mean, it is really flat, Ben. Like it was last week, and then even more so this week. Just as an example, you have at the top of the position, the top of the position you have. Sorry, my computer froze up on me. You have who's at the top? Oh, Roethlisberger, right? And then Roethlisberger and Ryan, right? Those two guys, and Rivers. So all three of them whom are in play, by the way. Particularly Roethlisberger, Rivers for me. But not much further down. Like you have Mahomes at 62, tough spot, of course. But the biggest difference between like Stafford and Roethlisberger is $1,000. I mean, there's just no real disparity in pricing this week. Sure, $1,000 will open up a little bit, but it's just incredibly flat in that respect.
Yeah, and that's what I think what we're going to see going forward. It doesn't seem like they want to price them over 7K, and makes it tough to take aggressive stands because there's too many pivots within the same range.
Oh man, I think at the position though, if you're like Roethlisberger, Rivers, Bortles, if you wanted to, you have Stafford. There's just
I kind of like Cousins with Thielen and Diggs against your boys.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles secondary has looked atrocious, man. That game against Tennessee, just for the viewers, if you didn't get to see that game, there was one thing that stood out to me that was egregious. You had guys like Corey Davis just eating them up, and Ronald Darby's playing 10 yards off of him on every snap. Like, Mariota is a guy that his arm has been all beat up. Why are you playing 10 yards back? And they're killing you on every single time. So you're not getting pressure. They're getting the ball out quick, and Darby and Mills are nowhere to be found. I mean, it was really embarrassing the way that they just got torn up on the side and on the sidelines and on the middle of the field. They just got ravaged everywhere, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, Darby's pretty good, but Bills has never been good. The thing that made them
I don't think Darby's good. I think he's overrated as fuck. Sorry about that.
He was good his rookie year. He's been banged up off and on. I think that's
Namdi Asamoah had a couple good years too.
Yeah, but that was a totally different scheme. But yeah,
it was all scheme. I know.
Yeah.
But
anyway, the point being more on them is it's not about them being good. And last year, it's not like they were that good. When you have a pass rush like Philly had last year, you don't really need amazing cornerbacks back there because you only have to hold it. You only have to hold it for a little bit. I think the pass rush will get better. I actually think a pass rush is okay against Kirk Cousins because then he gets into that situation we were talking about where he throws a pick six and the game is just out of control and he's got to launch the ball. Kirk Cousins is not that great of a quarterback in real life, but he's a monster fantasy guy because he will launch the damn ball. And if Philly is winning at home and Minnesota's trailing, and they have a very concentrated way that they go after their guys. It's Thielen and Diggs. And if they're behind, I think that could be a really nice tournament stack that I don't know will be crazy owned just with some of the other options.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be very owned either. Look, teams like the Giants have a formula that works against the Eagles. They lost both games to them last year, but it was all quick outs from Eli Manning. Just, you can't hold on to the ball. Get rid of the ball quick, and then what happens? You score. Like Sterling Shepard had monster games working out of the slot against the Eagles, even when Beckham was out. I mean, this team with quick outs against them they get beat up, and Mariota did that. We've seen Eli do it so many times. I guess I'd say this, Andrew, if that was how the Vikings are operating, because Cousins has faced this team a lot, playing in the same division for many years. Who do you think benefits more from that as pass catchers for Minnesota?
Well, Thielen's the slot guy. I think Thielen probably is a little safer, but Diggs, Ben, you've talked about this before. Thielen is a little safer. His volume, he's not going to have the no floor game. And Diggs is potentially scary. He occasionally turns in those 3-catch, 40-yard games, but Diggs has the monster upside. So, and I think if you're going to go there, I don't think Diggs and Thielen are too expensive for cash. So is Cousins. So it's a tournament play, and I'm playing all three, and I'm just trying to just go after it because it's pretty concentrated. And you hope that Cousins throws for 400 yards, and they each get 150 of it.
I like it, man. I like it. All right, we're gonna head out of here. I know you got to get going, Andrew. Last question for both of you. Defense this week. Where are you going at defense? Because when you're looking at value, there doesn't appear to be much of it. Anyone that stands out to you guys from a strong value play at defense special teams?
It's been overly obvious, I think, the first couple weeks. This is a tough one. I talked about the Chargers. I'll say my favorite Brownies at home. They're still very cheap. The Ravens are not a great offense. No good?
How did I know?
Oh. Yeah.
No, I said, how did I know you were going to go with the Browns?
Yeah, I mean, me. So I might pay down with them, and they get pressure. Flacco's still Flacco.
All right. It's tough, though, Andrew. There's really no one down here that jumps off the page at all. If all of Green Bay's receivers out, do you play Detroit? Probably not. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, I don't mind Philly,
Buffalo?
Again, taking it's a tournament play. I guess what we need to get used to is that it's not a bad idea to be playing both an offense and the opposing defense. Not in the same lineup, but they can both be good spots.
It's a baseball thing, as you've stated.
Yeah. The super high, because the White Sox or something like that, you can play the pitcher against them because they strike out all the time. But when they score runs, they score a shitload of them because they got a ton of power. The Brewers are the better example of that, I guess. But, I think that Minnesota is one of those teams that will screw up and turn the ball over a lot, and they can also just put up crazy numbers. And Philly's got a lot of talent on that defensive line. So I think that eventually they'll get better. Minnesota also doesn't have a great offensive line. So I think the pressure will be there, and Kirk Cousins might do Kirk Cousins-y things.
Would it be crazy to play the Bills at home against Tennessee?
I looked at that. I don't think so, but me. I for some reason, I like these teams I like the worst team in the league every year.
I don't know how crazy it would be, honestly. I think Tennessee comes back down to earth after that outburst against Philadelphia. So if I had to go cheap somewhere, it would be there. You obviously don't count on them. You're not confident in them, but paying $4,000 for Tennessee is not exactly what I'm looking to do. I'm not trying to start my lineups out with a $38 or a $4,000 defense on the road. I don't care who they're playing.
Carolina's not a crazy price.
No, they're not. Neither are the Niners. I mean, that's a bad defense, but Arizona's offense is just putrid. I still think that's sketchy. I think if there were ever a game where Arizona does find ways to score, it would be this week. I mean, they're bad, but and someone mentioned that it wasn't on this show, but that David Johnson only averaged 3.2 yards per carry last week. Yeah, but at least they were competitive. At least he had 22 carries. It doesn't matter what he's doing. You have to feed him the ball no matter what. And whatever happens, happens. That's your only chance of staying competitive.
And the San Francisco defense is not good, so there's a real chance. Denver's the last defense. They're on the road, which isn't that fun, but man, they can get a good pass rush, and against Josh Rosen, that could be fun.
Darnold.
Sorry. They're all the same.
They're not cheap though, but I agree. 3,200. That's a very strong play. They should eat him up for sure and get some interceptions, potentially a pick six. All right, boys. Any last words, Ben? What do you got for us heading out for Thursday? You and I will be back for the game plan on Sunday morning as well. And you guys, are you still doing from A to B during the break? I mean, I guess you are since you don't talk baseball really.
For sure, yeah. Tomorrow we'll be doing that, and then Sunday. I think we're gonna have to wait on these injuries to see what unfolds. It's hard to really look at the slate as a whole right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew,
Yeah,
close it out, baby.
I'm with that. I think there's going to be a lot of news coming out. We'll figure it out. Probably Saturday, I'll push another projection update when we really get an idea of like who's in and who's out. And I think that's going to make a big difference for, I think some value is going to open up one way or another here, and everything is going to be different from what we're talking about right now. So just pay attention this week.
Yep. That'll do it for us, three fellas talking football. Thanks as always for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week, same time. Thursday night prediction. Andrew, final score.
Josh gets to 11 days before the wife actually finally freaks out. No, I'll go. I'll say Pats 31-14.
Was that Josh's voice laughing?
Yeah.
That was, huh? All right, Ben?
I'll say 38-17.
Did Andrew say that he thinks the Pats are going to lose?
No, it's a 31-14 Pats.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Same ballpark. Just
give me 34-27 Patriots. High scoring affair here.
I think the Colts cover. Interesting.
We'll see. I think it's very possible. All right. We'll see you back here next week, and stick around for Sunday's show, leading you up to close to lock. Once we have all the injury news, it'll be a whole lot easier. Good luck. We'll see you on Sunday and next Thursday. Later.